Welcome back to Preparing for the Unexpected. Today we are talking with Regina Phelps. Regina, lots of great stuff there in the first segment. Now let's change gears a little bit and let's talk a little bit more about cyber, which we touched on in the first one, but let's go a little bit deeper with that.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think, of course, cybersecurity is a huge issue that we are talk about with a lot of frequency, and certainly executives are interested, boards are interested, and it's something that actually is always at the top of mind in many companies. But when we have something like the disruption that's going on right now in Iraq, and now the bombing of a base in Qatar, and the instability, there's going to be a huge increase in the amount of cyber attacks. This could be as simple as phishing attacks that could come to you in the form of a text or possibly in an email, but also then the issues related to actual real attacks at companies. And that could be, again, think about what your company might do. Are you a supplier of certain aspects of anything in the military? Are you
Yes.
somehow related to the government in any way? Are you somehow maybe personally supporting a particular political individual or not? Any of those kinds of things that could make you more vulnerable, more visible, I think are really at bay here. And I think the thing it's not just those attacks coming from the Middle East. People that are, bad guys are opportunistic, right? So I would expect that we would see hackers from all over the world kind of really piling on, if you will. And I think you had mentioned something we were talking in the break, the idea, even things such as scams, if you will, trying to raise money for victims, and which you see periodically with the Gaza war, you see that could easily happen with what's
Mhm.
going on in the Middle East. So I think there needs to be a heightened level of awareness. It's an opportunity for companies to really do additional education about cybersecurity and about phishing attacks, because I think we are going to have more of those going forward. And I think that's something that we need to really put at the top of our list.
And I don't think organizations, they may take cyber seriously, the topic seriously, but I don't think many are actually managing it the correct way.
Mm.
I'm finding almost everywhere over the last few years that I've been, we have a cyber response plan.
Mm-hmm.
And instantly, when I finally get to see it, if they even let people know about it,
Yeah, right.
there's no link to business continuity, no
Yeah.
link to emergency management, no link to IT disaster recovery. And I'm
Mhm.
going, so you're going to have this event occur and you don't have the right communications involved, you don't have IT involved, who, cyber, I know you are considered part of IT anyway, but they've carved off from IT in many organizations now. So they're creating their own silo and
Mhm.
they're not dealing with all these other groups that would have a part to play.
Mhm.
Like, so how do you have a cyber response plan? All you've got is a document telling you what you're going to do, and
Mhm.
no one else knows what to do at all. And you don't
Mhm.
even have a way to talk to them. So
Right.
you
Right.
sure you've got a response plan, a good response plan in place?
Yeah, we could do a whole session on that, but I see that a lot with a lot of frequency. And it's very funny because I design, I don't know, maybe 50 cyber exercises a year. And I see that often where all of a sudden, if it's a cyber event, to your point, it's assumed, if you will, that the information security, cyber team, et cetera, is not only going to be in charge of the activity, but they're going to be then in charge of everything else that
Mhm.
sort of globally. And I really push back at that because, frankly, if you have an information security individual, cybersecurity person, and you've got a team and an incident response team and all of those things, great, that's fabulous. And there should be a very effective plan about how they are managing that incident. But that particular group should still be part of the corporate crisis management team.
Yeah.
And in particular, the person leading the corporate crisis management team should not be the person running the cyber response. And I actually have a client right now. We're planning a big exercise for the fall, and it's like, no, 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 I have to be in charge, right? The cyber guy. And it's like, really? You know, aren't you going to be busy? Don't you have a lot of things to be worried about? Shouldn't you be leading your team? Aren't you the information expert? And therefore, you should be doing that. And then, to your point, the crisis management team at the corporate level should include, HR and facilities and
Mm,
security and business continuity and the key lines of business and communications and finance and insurance and blah, 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 blah. And I need a very skilled person who runs events with frequency to run that team. And you, very important information security person, should be running the response for
hmm.
cybersecurity. So I totally agree with you. But I think, to that point, there's a lot of push pull that I see, like, oh, I need to be in charge. Well, we're not taking you being in charge of your event away. We're just supporting you by doing everything else that needs to happen when a
Hmm.
bad thing happens, right? So I
Yeah.
totally agree with you, and I see that with a lot of frequency. So I think this would be a good opportunity in addition to things when people are looking at their level of being ready for a cyber attack, this is a good opportunity to do some really impromptu, quick exercises where
Yeah.
you can literally pull together all of the people that likely would be a part of that response, with the information security people and how they would then plug in and then how we would activate everybody else and just pick some very simple scenarios. Because I think our chances of having more phishing attacks, more attacks in general, as the world is melting down around us, are going to be really, really good.
Hmm. I agree with the smaller exercises. I have a client, we're going to be doing that in the next few months
Oh, great.
with each of these teams that we need to bring awareness to, because we're rebuilding this program. So we've got a lot of awareness and training to do and things to put in place.
Mhm.
And I said, why don't we have these little tests, exercises, whatever you want to call them, micro simulations is something else I've heard them called. I said, just figure out where they think they fit in,
Right.
what they expect to come to come to them, what they're going to do with it, or what they do in their team, and what they're sending out,
Hmm.
how they're
Hmm.
communicating. I said, I bet you we will find things that nobody has mentioned yet.
I'm sure.
I said, guaranteed, we're going to uncover things.
Hmm.
And it took a while to convince some people, and they said, that might scare people. And I said, well, and
Oh, really?
they happen to know who Regina Phelps is.
Hmm.
And I said, we don't have to make them cry. And they said, like Regina Phelps. I said, yeah, like Regina.
Right.
We don't have to make them cry. I said, we just need them to open up and
Right.
realize, hey, now that we've identified these things we never knew before, and you never knew before, let's
Hmm.
work on them to move forward,
Hmm. Hmm.
and fix this stuff. And so that you do get a better comfort level. Because they were starting off, yeah, we feel great. Yeah, we're prepared. But then when we started to talk about this, suddenly you could tell looks around the room.
Yep.
Yeah, you're not as comfortable as you think you are,
Absolutely.
now that you're being challenged.
I love that. That's great. That's wonderful. One of the things that we encourage a lot of our clients to do is that even just the initial assessment process, which in many companies, unless they have a really well-designed crisis management program, have done not a very good job of developing. And so we set up what we call initial assessment teams as part of our methodology in developing crisis management teams. And sometimes we'll just do very quick and easy, if you will, initial assessment team meetings, which essentially is the event, whatever it might be, a cyber event, maybe it's a facilities issue, maybe it's an HR related concern. It gets up to a level of, okay, what's the criteria, right? That makes them like, oh, this is bigger than a bread box. And
Mhm.
then they reach up and contact who, and then there's a group of people that are all part of the corporate crisis management team, about, could be 4 or 5 people in most organizations. They come together using a pre-established set of criteria, and then they go through and they make the decision, do we simply just monitor this, or do we activate a larger team to support this related issue? And the idea is that that's an important process that people need to work out and practice with some regularity. And then once you have something like that, then you have to educate the hinterlands, wherever that is, that any place that you have a shingle that everyone knows, I don't care if it's one person in an office, that if something happens and it kind of looks like this, then you pick up the phone and you call this number, and then you're going to get connected to the people and you're going to tell them what the problem is, and they're going to make a decision based on that. So if companies don't do that down to the every place you have a presence, then you're going to have something happen in some small little location with 5 people, and next thing you know, it's a big deal. And you
Yeah.
don't know about it because they didn't know to call you,
Yeah.
right?
And part of that is they'll wait to make that call
Of
because
course.
they start making their own decision. Ah, it's not important. I don't need to let anybody know.
Right.
While
Project
that's going
managing.
on and people are ignoring this, while it's escalating
Right.
or getting worse or more users are being impacted, whatever the event is,
Mhm.
then when something finally does kick in, hey, we need to do something, you're now in panic mode.
Right.
So now
Right.
that you're in panic mode, you start making the wrong decisions, compounding the issue you've got, and you're actually getting yourself into a worse situation.
Absolutely.
Which, if you had notified, trained everyone to make a notification to, that number right off the bat,
Mhm.
it may not never have gotten to that point where anyone on a crisis management team needed to get involved.
Totally.
You
Totally.
know,
Totally.
I've seen that happen where people get overexcited. Oh, we need to do something, and they start making rash decisions.
Right.
Sorry,
Wrong
irrational
decisions.
decisions. Yeah, they're definitely not calm. And they're,
Yeah.
you do this, you do that, you do this, and the other thing, and everyone starts getting panicky. Well, if you've got a whole room full of people who are agitated and stressed out now, you think they're going to make the right decision?
Probably not.
No.
No. Yeah, I think those kinds of things are wonderful, and to use those opportunities. And I think now we are in a position with what's going on around the world that these little mini exercises, these little assessment team events, whatever it might be, are really important. And if we also then sort of tie that back to this issue of cybersecurity, I would really hope that people in our profession are using this as an opportunity to really educate people, remind folks. And this is also a great opportunity for those that are conducting phishing exercises in their organization to maybe have them under the guise of, again, well, as we talked about earlier, maybe, support for those who are impacted, or making it somewhere about this issue related that we're having here in both, like with immigration or things about the war in the Middle East. I think that would be also really good to sort of use those contemporary events
Hmm.
as something that they might do a phishing attack about.
Yep. Yeah, because it's going to come from anywhere because everyone that is a nefarious player
Hmm.
is going to find a way to benefit from catastrophe.
Absolutely.
It
Absolutely.
sounds terrible. We tell ourselves
Hmm.
in our industry, find the opportunity in disruption, but it seems like we never do and we never learn. But the bad guys do.
Right. Right. Yeah,
Explain
they're motivated by money usually.
that. Yeah, very much so.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So what's next? What other wonderful things are happening in the world? I know
Do you
we
want to
touched
take a
on the
break, or
supply
do you want
chain.
to keep going?
Oh, let's keep going. Let's
Okay.
keep going. Why
So,
not?
okay. So then the other thing I think that's really important that we really focus on is, and I've talked about this with you 100 million times, but this issue of value. So here we are in a very unstable time in the world, and especially economically. And what I've already started to see in my client population and in my many friends and colleagues that do the same kind of work that you and I do is this uncertainty about what is going on is making companies look more at the bottom line. And you and I both know, and I've done this work long enough to know, that when that occurs, and if they're looking down the spreadsheet of how money is spent, what they're really going to be focusing on those are those non-revenue generating departments or groups or employee populations. And we, in our field, are in that group, right? We're
Yeah.
non-revenue generating. So then what happens is that the question is that what kind of value do you provide every day to your organization? And you and I have talked a lot about that in all the years that we've been talking. But I think this is another important opportunity for people in our work to basically say, what value do I provide to the organization every single day? And I will tell you, if all your response is to the executive who asks you that question is, when the bad thing happens, you'll be really happy we have all these plans and processes. And, that isn't going to fly because
Yeah.
the next question they're going to ask you is, well, when was the last time we pulled them out to use them? And you and I both know, Alex, you know, I have a ton of clients that have never had an activation in their entire program's history.
Yep. Just collecting
So,
dust.
right. And you could just say, well, maybe it's luck, or maybe we're just living right, or I don't know what. But, you know, if our attitude is that we're only really helpful to you when the bad thing happens, then you are really barking up the wrong tree.
Yeah.
So I think we need to have encourage all of our colleagues. This is a time to have what is the value add of what I do every single day? And this is something where you may think like, well, I don't know. I don't know what kind of value I add besides making all those plans and blah, 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 and having exercises. I mean, none of those things count in the value conversation, really. What you
Right.
need to be thinking about is what's the value of this work overall? And so so what would be a good example for you, Alex, of what's the value that we provide?
I think it's making connections, creating a network, and starting conversations.
Hmm.
If we see, look at the headlines today, and let's say a building somewhere had an issue with facilities. Well, let's go ask the facilities guy right off the bat. Hey,
Hmm.
is this something we should be concerned? Like being really proactive in approach and
Hmm.
getting people to talk to uh,
Hmm.
with each other who may not actually talk to each other on a regular basis.
Ever.
So let's bring those people together and get other people talking. It doesn't mean we have to sit there at the head of the table
Hmm.
and be in charge of everything under the sun, which is what I think sometimes
Hmm.
gets communicated.
Hmm.
Uh,
Hmm.
if you're a resilience or a business continuity, you're professional, you have to know these 100 different things. Well, yeah, that's great for a big consulting firm who have 100 different people, each with their specialized skill. That's easy for you to say,
Hmm.
but
Hmm.
departments of one can't do that.
Right.
So the
Right.
value for us, I think, is getting people to talk with each other, with you, and you starting those conversations so they see you as a pivotal role,
Hmm.
and not a management role or an analyst role, but a leadership role,
Hmm. Hmm.
and
Hmm.
going out there and talking to people. So that's one thing I think we
Hmm.
should start doing. Get out of our little cubicles and whether it be home office or whatever, but you know what I mean,
Yep.
and get out there and start asking the questions, reach out, take that first step.
Hmm. Well, let me build on that. So I think that to me that gets into the issue of mitigating risk. So one of the things that we do in our work, of course, is that when you look at both BIAs and you look at continuity plans, we're understanding more deeply what the organization is, and therefore we should be also simultaneously understanding what the risks are. So whether you've done the hazard risk assessment yourself, at your organization, or maybe somebody else does it. But the idea of taking that kind of knowledge, combining that against your business continuity plans, and thinking about ways that you can mitigate risk right now so that even if something happens, the worst thing doesn't occur because you have already found ways to mitigate that.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
so I think mitigation is a really important thing. And again, with climate change and things really evolving and changing quickly, that's a really important related issue. I think the other thing is so another one way that we're providing value every day, and you sort of alluded to this also, is the issue of training. So we are providing as part of our work in continuity planning and business continuity plans themselves and exercises, we are training people in some ways day-to-day processes, but we're also training them on what they do when those processes don't work.
Hmm.
And they don't work for a lot of reasons, and it's not often that it's a big, gigantic disaster that they quit working. I mean, think of the IT related issues. If a particular application becomes unavailable for hours or days, your operation is still functional, you're still working, but you might be pulling out continuity plans or different aspects of them in order to do work manually, right? So
Yeah.
you're still providing a service even though you didn't have the big thing happen, right?
Yeah.
So really looking at risks and making sure that you're actually being able to address those in real time, being able to make sure that when things actually do fail, and I'm not talking about the big gigantic failure, but just the small failures, that you can actually support those
Hmm.
and you can actually continue the work. I'm
Yeah.
also having a lot of clients where they're having people like the boomers are all starting to retire. And
Yeah.
I'll say
Taking
to
all
them,
their knowledge with them.
exactly. I have one client that actually has a very long shelf where everybody has a long shelf life, which is unusual anymore, but the people stay for years and now they're having all of these boomers retire. And so when they're doing that, they're taking away with them huge amounts of knowledge. And so I keep saying to them, you know what you could be doing is you could be sitting down with those people and you build that knowledge into a continuity plan, thinking about like the steps it takes to actually solve a particular problem or things that they just know intuitively because they used to do them more manually than by computer. And how can you then take some of that knowledge and actually build a plan that's more functional based on those experiences that people have?
Yeah.
You know, when you look at the skill set that's required. So I think it's an opportunity to get in knowledge and then use that knowledge for training and also to be able to use that knowledge when we have the small thing happen, which is also what we're for too, is small things, right?
Yeah. I couldn't
Yeah.
help but think of the old way we used to do credit cards. Remember the
Oh,
machine? You know, you know,
yeah,
people
there's
would
a
have no idea how to do that today, or what information is actually required when you do it.
right,
They
right,
have no clue. And
right.
the other thing to take one of the pieces you said a step further as well is we're not just by going out there and doing these tests and training people, we're not just training them on how to follow a plan or what contingency to implement or how to do things in an alternate way when the big system or the little system is no longer working. We're
Hmm.
also training them how to manage themselves,
Hmm.
how
Absolutely.
they can get better. Say, hey, I don't need to freak out or worry.
Hmm.
I've gone through this before. We did it under controlled circumstances. It's different now, but I know what to do because we've done it a few times before. Okay, Bob, can you do this? Sally, can you do that?
Hmm.
Instead of one person doing it, if you guys both separate this, we can continue on by doing this. So it helps train them to
Totally.
calm themselves as
Hmm.
well and increase not just their knowledge but their mindsets
Hmm.
when
Hmm.
adverse situations are encountered as well.
Hmm. You know, another example of how we provide value that they might be more familiar with, but it may not come to their mind, is that let's say that you have you need to demonstrate to a client or a customer or your insurance company what kind of level of readiness you have. They're going to look to all the plans, processes, exercises that you've developed to basically demonstrate that you have reliability, that you have functionality when there might be disruptions to electrical services or other types of things. So you have a opportunity to prove. So whether that's to an insurance company or to many times many of my large customers have other customers asking them, you know, what's your level of readiness, and they have to fill out all these forms. And
Yeah,
who do they come to for that? They come to the continuity department because they're the ones that basically are doing all of that. So it shows that you have thought and processes and you've really looked at how to be prepared, and that will help you with insurance, with large customers, with regulators. So I think it's we provide lots of value that's not so obviously apparent.
yeah,
And so I would say to all of our listeners that this is an opportunity for you to really brainstorm with your colleagues, really think about what kind of value do I provide so that if things do get tight financially, which I expect is going to happen, you know, for a forecast of a recession keeps increasing in the United States. And if we have one, likely lots of other people will
mhm,
have one.
yeah,
And this gives you an opportunity to say to your management, look at the value that I provide every single day. And you should be able to spit out, you know, five, six, seven things that you do that has nothing to do about the activation of all those plans
right.
when the bad thing happens. And I think I just want to emphasize that again and again, because as things get tight, us non-revenue generating departments are going to be looked at with a different kind of scrutiny than
Yeah.
we normally are.
I want to just, I know we've only got like 2 minutes left, but I want to jump on something you just mentioned.
Yeah.
Some of these surveys that we get from our partners and potential clients asking about our state of readiness and what we have in place and things like that.
Right.
You
Right.
can take that to help build your own programs as well. Because
Absolutely.
this is what we're being asked if we have. So
Mhm.
this is what's out there. This is what people are looking for. Do we have this ourselves?
Mhm.
Because a
And
lot of
if we
times we're
don't,
afraid to respond, right?
right,
Let's
right.
look. Let's build this up, and take that forward. So
Mhm.
it's not just someone knocking on the door, hey, what the heck you got in place? It's,
Mhm.
hey, there's an opportunity here for us
Mhm.
to get better.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. And I think that that's something that we should be using as an opportunity to both reflect what we have, to be able to sell what we need to have, and also to be able to sell what we already have.
Yes. Yeah. We got 1 minute left. Do you have any final thoughts?
Well, I guess I would say that in this time of uncertainty, I would ask all of us to sort of take a deep breath periodically. You know, maybe disconnect from, even though situational awareness is extremely important in our work, sometimes you can stay too connected and you can actually start to have issues with your own personal sanity and mental health. So in a business that's very prone to people burning out based on what we do for a living, I would ask all of us to stop and think about, disconnect, take a deep breath, take a walk around the block, take care of yourself because we need all of you.
Mhm. And that's a perfect spot to end today's show. Regina, thank you once again. Always great chatting with you.
Thank you, my friend, as always. I enjoy it very much.
And everyone watching and listening, stay prepared, everybody.